The diner was almost empty that Sunday afternoon, the kind of quiet that feels like it's holding its breath. James, a young waiter, moved between tables with practiced precision, masking the weariness behind his polite smile. At 23, he had learned the delicate balance between cheerfulness and exhaustion. He worked 2 jobs to keep his apartment and help his younger sister with her college tuition. Some days, it felt like no amount of hard work could lift the weight pressing down on him. When she walked in, James noticed immediately. She wasn't loud, and she didn't command attention. Her presence was subtle, almost gentle. She had kind eyes that seemed to notice everything, from the small imperfections of the diner to the way James carried himself. She chose a corner table near the window, set her purse down carefully, and opened a book, oblivious to the few patrons around her. James approached with a menu, ready to take her order. "Hi there. Can I get you started with something to drink?" he asked, trying to keep his voice light, even though his stomach was twisting with the usual tension of waiting tables. "Just water, please," she said softly, smiling as if she could see the invisible strain clinging to him. As James left to get her drink, he couldn't shake the feeling that she was different, like she carried her own quiet strength. He returned moments later, taking her order for a simple grilled cheese and a cup of tomato soup. It wasn't a complicated meal, but James prepared it with care, adding extra attention to every detail, as if somehow she could sense whether he had done his best. When he set the meal in front of her, she thanked him, a small gesture that warmed his heart in a way nothing else had all day. Most customers were indifferent, hurried, or distracted by their phones. But she looked at him, really looked, and for a moment, James felt seen. She ate slowly, savoring every bite, and James returned to his other tables, stealing glances when he could. When the check came, he approached with a mild sense of routine. Then it happened. She handed him a crisp $100 bill for a $10 meal. His heart stopped. He blinked, thinking he must have misheard. "Are you sure?" he asked, his voice catching in disbelief. She nodded, smiling warmly. "Yes. Thank you for taking care of me today. That's all." James froze, unable to comprehend the gesture. His mind raced, not just with shock, but with the realization that this stranger had just changed his entire day, maybe even his month. And in that moment, something inside him shifted. Sometimes, kindness comes when you least expect it, and it hits harder than any paycheck ever could. James stood there, staring at the bill in his trembling hands, feeling a mix of disbelief and gratitude. He had waited tables for 3 years, but no tip had ever made him feel so utterly human. Not just money, it was acknowledgement, recognition, a spark of hope in a world that often seemed too busy to care. He glanced at the woman, but she had already returned to her book, serene and unassuming. He wanted to say something, anything, but words faltered. Finally, he managed a quiet, "Thank you. Really. Thank you so much." Her smile didn't falter. "You're welcome. Just keep spreading it," she said simply, closing her book and standing to leave. James watched her walk out, the bell above the diner's door jingling softly behind her. After her departure, he felt the surreal weight of the moment. $100 for a $10 meal. It was more than he earned in a single shift, more than enough to cover his rent for the week. But beyond that, it was validation. He hadn't realized how much he needed it until now. The story of the tip quickly spread among his coworkers. Mia, a seasoned waitress, shook her head in disbelief. "You're lucky, James. I've never seen anything like it." He smiled weakly, still processing, but he couldn't stop thinking about the woman. There was something about her presence, quiet and unassuming, that lingered in his chest like a soft glow. That evening, James returned home, the money tucked carefully into his wallet. His sister, Emily, was waiting, scrolling through her phone. "You won't believe this," he said, voice thick with emotion. He handed her the wallet, and she gasped. $100? From one customer. She asked, wide-eyed. "Yeah. And it wasn't just the money. It was like she reminded me that people still notice the little things, that kindness exists." Emily smiled softly, reaching out to squeeze his hand. "That's incredible. Honestly, I wish everyone could meet people like that. That night, James couldn't sleep. He thought about the ripple effect of one simple act, how a stranger's generosity had the power to lift someone burdened by life's weight, even for just a day. The next morning, he decided he had to do something more than just let the moment pass. He packed an extra coffee and sandwich and headed to the local shelter, surprising the staff with a small donation. He even gave one sandwich to a homeless man outside, whose eyes lit up with gratitude. He didn't post about it. He didn't brag. He simply felt the joy of paying it forward, understanding, in that quiet way, that this stranger's tip had sparked something bigger than he had imagined. Sometimes, a small gesture doesn't just help, it inspires a chain reaction that touches more lives than you could ever see. Word of James's story began to circulate on social media, not because he sought attention, but because someone had captured the moment. A coworker snapped a photo of the $100 bill lying on the receipt and shared it online, along with James's stunned expression. Within hours, the post went viral. Comments poured in from people across the country, some cheering him on, some sharing their own stories of unexpected generosity, all marveling at the simplicity of human kindness. James felt conflicted about the attention. He hadn't done anything remarkable, he thought. He had simply done his job. But people saw it differently. They saw authenticity, humility, and a reminder of what it means to care for one another. Then came the emails. Messages from people offering support, encouragement, and even job opportunities. A local news outlet contacted him for an interview. He hesitated at first, shy and protective of his quiet life, but eventually agreed. Sitting in front of the camera, recounting the moment, he realized he was telling a story far bigger than himself. Meanwhile, the woman who left the tip, her identity unknown, became a subject of fascination. People wanted to find her, to thank her, to understand her motives. But James didn't know her name, and he wasn't sure he wanted to. Maybe some acts of kindness were meant to remain anonymous, untainted by attention. A week later, something unexpected happened. A small envelope arrived at the diner, addressed to James. Inside was a handwritten note. Keep going. Keep noticing. Keep caring. Someone who believes in you. There was no signature, no way to trace it back. Alongside the note was another $50 bill. James laughed softly, a mix of amusement and tears. The note was simple, yet it carried the same power as the first tip, reminding him that kindness was its own reward, that it could exist without reason or expectation. He began to look at his work differently. Every customer, every interaction, was an opportunity, not just to serve, but to connect, to share a small part of humanity. Even the grumpy patrons or they, impatient lunchgoers, couldn't dull the glow he felt from the knowledge that someone, somewhere, had reminded him of what mattered most. Months passed, and James continued his life, changed in ways that weren't visible but were deeply felt. He gave quietly, smiled freely, and no longer counted the long hours as mere labor. They were chances to be seen, to be noticed, and to offer a fraction of the same light that had been given to him. Sometimes, the world shows up for you when you least expect it, and when it does, you realize the beauty of paying it forward. One rainy evening, James was closing the diner when he noticed a young couple struggling to corral their baby in the rain. Without thinking, he ran out with a large umbrella and helped shield them as they made their way to their car. The couple thanked him profusely, and he waved it off, used to small gestures of service. But inside, he felt the same warmth he had when the $100 tip first came into his hands. Days later, he was approached by a local charity organization. They had seen his story online and wanted him to speak to volunteers about the ripple effect of generosity. Nervous but inspired, James agreed. Standing in front of a room full of people committed to helping others, he shared not just the tip, but the story of the stranger, the anonymous note, and the realization that kindness doesn't have to be grand, it just has to exist. The audience listened, captivated, nodding as he spoke, of how one small act had not only helped him financially but emotionally, lifting him from despair into hope. One volunteer stood up afterward and said, "You've reminded us all that we can make a difference, without needing to be rich or famous. Just caring is enough." James left the event with a renewed sense of purpose. He understood that life was not just about survival or climbing the ladder. It was about noticing, giving, and connecting. Every small interaction, every shared smile, could spark a chain reaction of humanity. Back at the diner, he noticed the same woman walk past, the one who had changed his life months ago. He ran outside, heart pounding, but she simply waved and kept moving. She didn't stop to explain, didn't demand recognition. She was a quiet force, a reminder that the greatest acts often leave no trace, except the feeling they create in others. James returned to his routine, serving meals with a newfound energy. His co-workers noticed the change, the way he smiled more genuinely, lingered with customers, and occasionally slipped an extra cookie onto a child's plate. Small acts multiplied. Word spread. The diner became known not just for its food, but for the warmth and attention of its staff. One evening, a young man handed James a folded piece of paper. Inside was a note. "Saw what you did for the baby in the rain. Inspired me to help my neighbor. Thank you." Tears welled up in James's eyes. The chain continued, stretching farther than he could see. Kindness doesn't end where it starts. It travels in ways invisible but profoundly felt. Years later, James looked back on that $100 tip not as money, but as the beginning of a life lesson he would carry forever. The diner had changed, the city had changed, and he had changed. He had learned that small gestures, an extra smile, a helping hand, a tip well beyond expectation, could ripple through lives in ways that nothing else could. He never found the woman who started it all, and maybe that was for the best. Some stories are meant to be mysterious, reminders that the world can surprise you when you least expect it. But her impact remained vivid in his heart. She had seen him, acknowledged his humanity, and in doing so, sparked a chain of generosity that had touched countless others. James had become more than a waiter. He was now a mentor, a speaker, and a quiet leader in his community. He volunteered, organized food drives, and shared his story with anyone who would listen. Each act was a tribute, not just to the anonymous woman, but to the power of selflessness itself. One ordinary Tuesday, he was helping a young boy carry groceries to his car. The boy looked at him with wide, innocent eyes and asked, "Why do you always help everyone?" James smiled, kneeling to the boy's level. "Because sometimes, the world needs a little reminder that people care, and one small act can change everything." The boy nodded solemnly, a seed of understanding planted. James realized then that the lesson wasn't just for him, it was for the next generation, for anyone willing to notice, to care, and to act. As the sun set, casting golden light through the diner windows, James sat back, watching the familiar bustle of people coming and going. He thought about the $100 tip, the anonymous note, the baby in the rain, the volunteers, the strangers whose lives had intersected with his. All of it, interconnected, unstoppable. He realized that in a world so often overshadowed by cynicism and despair, simple kindness was revolutionary. It required nothing but attention, compassion, and the willingness to act. And maybe, just maybe, it was enough to change the world, one meal, one tip, one heart at a time. In the end, the greatest legacy is not what we accumulate, but what we give, and how it touches others in ways we may never see.